I've just returned from an extraordinary encounter with Sarah Ferguson. The Duchess of York, the palace confirmed a decision that reshapes the royal family's future and Prince Harry's place within it, sending a great impact far beyond Buckingham Palace. What began as quiet whispers behind closed doors has become a monumental turning point that no one saw coming. In a move filled with tension, consequence, and heartbreak, UK Parliament has officially voted to remove Harry from the royal line of succession. And now, with King Charles personally signing the historic document, the monarchy faces a future forever changed. This isn't just political history. It's the most dramatic shift in Harry's journey yet. The vote that stunned the palace. The clock struck 3 o'clock in the afternoon inside the grand halls of Parliament. Hundreds of members sat in wooden benches that had held powerful people for centuries. The air felt heavy. Everyone knew what was about to happen. This was not a normal day. This was the day that would change the royal family forever. A man stood up to speak. His voice echoed through the chamber. He talked about tradition and duty. He talked about what it means to be royal. Then he said the words that made everyone hold their breath. He proposed a vote to remove Prince Harry from the line of succession. The room went silent. Some people nodded, others looked shocked, but the vote was called. Hands rose into the air. One by one, members voted. The numbers were counted carefully. When the final tally came, the result was clear. The vote had passed. For the first time in modern history, Parliament had decided to take away a royal prince's place in line for the throne. The decision was made. There was no going back. News traveled fast, within minutes. Phones buzzed all across London. In Buckingham Palace, the mood changed instantly. Royal staff rushed through the long corridors. Their shoes clicked loudly on the marble floors. Papers were clutched in their hands. Important papers. Documents that needed a signature. A royal signature. King Charles sat in his private study. The room was filled with paintings of his ancestors. Kings and queens who had ruled before him stared down from golden frames. He had always known this room. It was where his mother had made difficult choices. Now it was his turn. An aide knocked softly on the door and entered. The papers were placed on the desk in front of which King Charles looked down at them. His hands rested on the smooth wood of the desk. This was his son, his own flesh and blood. The boy he had raised, the man who had walked away from royal duties, the prince who had chosen a different life. But Charles was not just a father at this moment. He was a king. He had taken an oath to protect the crown, to protect the institution that had stood for over 1,000 years. His personal feelings had to wait. The crown came first. It always came first. He picked up the pen. It felt heavy in his hand. With steady strokes, he signed his name, King Charles III, the signature that made it official. Prince Harry was no longer in the line of succession. The sixth in line to the throne was now removed, gone, erased from the official records that traced the future of the monarchy. Outside the palace walls, people gathered. Some were angry, some were sad. Others believed it was the right choice. The world had opinions. Everyone had something to say. But inside the palace, there was only silence. A heavy, thick silence filled every room. The decision was historic. Never before had a living prince been removed this way. Kings had given up thrones. Princes had been exiled. But this was different. This was Parliament and the king working together to reshape. The royal family to draw a new line to say clearly who belonged and who did not. But something else was happening too. Something that most people did not see yet. This vote was not just about Harry. It was about what happens when the rules change. When one person can be removed, it means the entire system can be questioned. Every royal, every title, every position could now be looked at differently. Deep in the palace, advisors spoke in hushed voices. They talked about what this meant for others in the family. People who had made mistakes, people who had caused problems, people who had once been close to the throne but had fallen from grace. One name came up more than others. Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, a woman who had been married to a prince but had divorced him. A woman who had stayed connected to the family but never quite belonged. A woman whose own mistakes had been splashed across newspapers for years. If Harry could be removed, what did that mean for her? What did it mean for her daughters? The advisors did not have all the answers yet, but they knew one thing for certain. This vote had opened a door, and once a door is opened, anything can walk through it. King Charles sat alone in his study. The papers were signed. The decision was made. But in his heart, he felt the weight of what had just. He had protected the crown, but he had lost something, too. Something that could never be given back. The palace lights glowed in the evening darkness. History had been made. Could things ever remain the same again? Keep watching to find out. The decisions, the distance, the breaking point. He was born into a life most people could never imagine. Cameras flashed the moment he entered the world. His mother held him close as the world watched. Prince Harry, the spare to the heir, the second son, the one who would always stand in the shadow of his older brother. But for a long time, that shadow felt safe. As a little boy, Harry ran through palace gardens. He played soldiers with toy guns. He laughed loudly and got dirty easily. His mother adored him. She took him to places other royals never went. Homeless shelters, hospitals. She wanted him to see the real world, to understand that being royal meant more than wearing crowns and waving from balconies. It meant caring for people who had nothing. Then everything changed. His mother died. Harry was just 12 years old. He walked behind her coffin as millions watched. His face was blank, but his heart was breaking. Something inside him cracked that day. A crack that would grow wider with every passing year. The public loved him. They saw him as the cheeky prince, the fun one, the one who made mistakes but always smiled. He served in the military and people respected that. He started charities for wounded soldiers. He seemed to be finding his path, a way to be royal that felt real and honest. But behind closed doors, things were different. Harry sat in meetings where old men talked about duty and tradition. They spoke about rules that had been followed for hundreds of years. Rules about who you could marry, rules about what you could say, rules about where you could go and who you could be friends with. So many rules. Late at night, Harry would sit in his apartment at Kensington Palace. The rooms felt empty even when people were there. He wondered what his life would look like in 10 years, in 20 years. Would he still be cutting ribbons at small events? Would he still be smiling for cameras while feeling hollow inside? Then he fell in love. She was different from anyone the family had known. She was American. She had been married before. She had her own career and her own voice. The palace did not know what to do with her. They tried to fit her into their old patterns. They gave her rules and schedules. They told her how to dress and what to say, but she did not want to be molded, and Harry did not want her to change. He had spent his whole life being told who to be. He did not want that for the woman he loved, so he started making choices. Choices that surprised everyone. The first signs of distance were small. Harry missed a royal engagement. He spoke sharply to an advisor. He asked questions about why things had to be done a certain way. The palace staff whispered they had seen this before. Royals who pushed against the walls that held them in. Never ended well. Then came the bigger decisions. Harry wanted to step back from some of his royal duties. He wanted to live part of the year in another country. He wanted to make his own money and choose his own projects. The family was stunned. This was not how things worked. You were born royal and you stayed royal. You did your duty until the day you died. Meetings were called. Serious meetings with his grandmother, with his father, with palace lawyers who knew every law and tradition. Harry sat across from them and explained what he wanted. Freedom, privacy, a chance to build a life that felt like his own. They listened, but they did not understand. To them, being royal was the greatest gift. To Harry, it was starting to feel like a prison. His brother tried to talk to him. Late one evening, they sat together in a room where they had played as children. The conversation was difficult. William could not understand why Harry would walk away. He had accepted his role. He had made peace with the duty. Why could Harry not do the same? But Harry saw things differently. He had watched his mother's struggle. He had seen how the palace protected the institution, but not the people inside it. He did not want to spend his life pretending to be happy while feeling trapped. So he chose to leave. The public was divided. Some people supported him. They believed he had the right to live his own life. Others were angry. They said he was selfish, that he was abandoning his duty, that he was disrespecting his grandmother and everything she had built. Inside the palace, there was something else. Fear, not fear of Harry leaving, but fear of what it meant for the future. Harry was sixth in line to the throne. That meant if something terrible happened, if several people died in an accident, Harry could become king. A king who lived in another country. The documents were written, and when the moment came, the decision was swift. Harry was removed from the line of succession. The spare was no longer spared to anything. But something unexpected happened. When one person is removed from the line, everyone else shifts. Positions change. People who were far from the throne moved closer. People who had been forgotten suddenly matter again. The entire structure of the royal family began to rearrange itself like pieces on a chessboard. And in that rearrangement, old names surfaced. Names of people who had once been close to the crown but had fallen away. People who had made their own mistakes. People who had been pushed to the edges of the family but never quite left. One of those names was Sarah Ferguson, a woman whose own past was filled with scandal and poor choices. She had lived in the shadows for years, but now with Harry gone. The shadows were shifting, and Sarah was about to step back into the light. Stay with us to know what happened next. The quiet power struggles. The morning after the vote, Buckingham Palace woke to a new reality. The sun rose over London just like it always did. The guards stood at their posts. The tourists gathered at the gates. But inside those ancient walls, everything had changed. Queen Camilla stood by the window of her private sitting room. She held a cup of tea that had gone cold. She had barely slept. All night her mind had turned over the same questions. What happens now? How do we move forward? How do we keep this family together when it feels like it is falling apart? She had not wanted this role. For years, she had been the woman people whispered about. The woman was blamed for breaking up a marriage. The woman who would never be accepted. But time had passed. She had worked quietly. She had supported Charles through everything. And slowly, very slowly, people had begun to accept her. Now she was queen. Not queen in her own right, but queen consort, the wife of the king. And with that title came responsibility. Heavy responsibility that pressed down on her shoulders like a weight she could not put down. Downstairs, advisors gathered in the statehooms. These were men and women who had served the crown for decades. They knew every rule, every tradition, every law that had been written to protect the monarchy. But now they faced something new, something none of them had prepared for. A senior advisor spread documents across a long mahogany table. The papers were old, some were hundreds of years old. They contained the laws about succession, about who could inherit the throne, about what happened when someone was removed from the line. The words were written in a language that felt ancient and strange. The problem was simple but enormous. Harry had been removed. That much was clear. But what did that mean for everyone else? The line of succession had to be rewritten. Names had to be moved. Positions had to be recalculated. And every change created new questions. One advisor pointed to a name on a document. A princess who was now closer to the throne than before. Another advisor shook his head. There were rules about that too. Rules about who could serve as regent if a child became king. Rules about who had to live in England. Rules about loyalty and duty and presence. The discussions went on for hours. Voices were raised. Arguments broke out. These were people who had spent their lives serving the crown. They all wanted to protect it, but they disagreed about how. Upstairs, Camilla met with Charles. He looked tired. The decision to sign those papers had cost him. She could see it in his eyes. He was king, but he was also a father. And those two roles were tearing him apart. They sat together in silence for a moment. Then Camilla spoke softly. The family needs stability. The public needs to see that we are strong, that we know what we are doing, that we have a plan. But Charles did not have a plan. Not yet. How could he? This had never happened before. There was no handbook for removing your own son from the succession. No guide for keeping a monarchy together when the world was watching every crack. That evening, a formal dinner was held. The extended family gathered, princes and princesses, dukes and duchesses, people who carried royal blood and royal titles. They sat at a table that could seat 50 people. Crystal glasses reflected candlelight. Silver plates gleamed, but the atmosphere was cold. Conversations were stiff and careful. Everyone knew what had happened. Everyone had opinions, but no one wanted to be the first to speak openly. So they talked about safe things, the weather, upcoming events, charities, and patronages. Anything but the truth that hung in the air like smoke. Camilla watched them all. She saw the worry in their faces, the uncertainty. Some of them were afraid. Afraid that if Harry could be removed, maybe they could be too. Afraid that the rules they had always trusted were no longer solid. Afraid that the monarchy itself was becoming fragile. After dinner, a smaller meeting took place. Just the senior royals and the closest advisors. This was where real conversations happened, where decisions were made behind closed doors. One advisor raised a concern. The public was confused. They did not understand why this vote had happened. They needed to see the royal family as united, as strong. But right now, the family looked broken, divided, weak. Another advisor spoke up. We need familiar faces, people the public trusts, people who understand duty and service. We need to show that the monarchy is bigger than any one person. That was when a name was mentioned quietly at first, almost as if the person speaking was not sure they should say it out loud. Sarah Ferguson. The room went silent. Several people looked surprised. Sarah, the Duchess of York, the woman who had been involved in scandals decades ago. The woman who had been divorced from Prince Andrew for years. But the advisor continued. Yes, Sarah, think about it. She has stayed close to the family despite everything. She has raised 2 daughters who are well loved. She has worked for charities. She has handled her own mistakes with grace. And most importantly, the public likes her. They see her as genuine, as a human, as someone who made mistakes but kept trying. Camilla listened carefully. She remembered Sarah. They had known each other for years. Sarah was complicated. She had made poor choices. She had been reckless with money. She had trusted the wrong people and ended up in embarrassing situations. But she had also been kind, loyal, in her own way. And she had never truly left the family. Even when others had pushed her away, another voice entered the conversation. Sarah is not perfect, but maybe that is exactly what we need right now. Someone who is not perfect. Someone who understands what it means to fall and get back up. Someone who can show that this family is not just about cold duty and tradition. That it is also about forgiveness and second chances. The discussion continued late into the night. Some people were against the idea. They remembered the old scandals too clearly. They worried about bringing back someone who had caused problems before. But others saw potential, a chance to reshape the narrative to show that the royal family could adapt. Camilla said little during the meeting, but she thought deeply about everything being said. She knew that the monarchy was at a turning point. The old ways were not working anymore. The public wanted royals who felt real, who made mistakes and learned from them, who showed emotion and vulnerability. Maybe Sarah Ferguson was not the answer to all their problems, but maybe she was part of the answer. Maybe in a family that had just lost one member, bringing back another could show strength instead of weakness. Maybe it was time to stop hiding from the past and start learning from it. As the meeting ended and people left the room, Camilla stayed behind. She looked at the portraits on the walls. Kings and queens from centuries past. They had all faced their own crises, their own moments of uncertainty, and somehow the crown had survived. Now it was her turn to help it survive. Her turn to make difficult choices. Her turn to think not just about what was proper, but about what was necessary. The name Sarah Ferguson lingered in her mind. A woman who had been pushed to the edges. A woman who had survived scandal and shame. a woman who might just be exactly what this troubled palace needed. The question was whether anyone would have the courage to bring her back. Keep watching to find out. Sarah Ferguson's turning point. Sarah Ferguson never imagined she would matter again. Not to the palace. Not to the people who made decisions behind those tall iron gates. She had accepted her place years ago. On the outside, looking in, close enough to see everything, but too far away to touch it. She remembered the beginning when she was young and full of energy, when she married Prince Andrew and became a duchess overnight. The crowds had loved her. They called her refreshing, different. She was not like the other royals who stood stiff and formal. She laughed loudly. She hugged people. She wore bright colors and spoke her mind. For a little while, she was exactly what the royal family needed. Someone who felt real. But being real came with a price. Sarah made mistakes, big mistakes. She trusted people who did not deserve trust. She got into debt. She made deals with the wrong kinds of people.